What's up, duelists? As you know, the last month or so, ever since RBET Los Angeles, the big story of Edison format has been Legacy of Yugioh and Jar of Greed. How many decks can take advantage of playing these incredibly powerful draw traps? Cards being drawn in Yu-Gi-Oh! Has always been one of the most powerful things you can do. It improves the consistency of your deck. It makes sure you can see your limited bombs. Make sure your deck doesn't have extra garnets or like these weird awkward draws where you have a bunch of normal summons. It just benefits a lot of strategies. And so I think today we're going to be talking a lot about the winners, the losers, and the who knows yet category of playing the 6 draw traps in today's metagame. So without further ado, let's get right into things. I think one of the biggest winners is the most obvious one, which is HT19's Blackwing list. I think Blackwings is going to be a huge benefit from this 6 draw phenomenon, the 6 draw trend in not only playing the 6 draw but playing against the 6 draw as well. I'll get into that here in a second. This is HT19's first place list from RBET LA. This is one of the lists that put this deck, or not this deck, but this strategy on the map of playing both 3 Jar of Greed and 3 Legacy of Aggro. And it just makes perfect sense. I mean, you want to draw into Dark Arm, you want to draw into Whirlwind, and you don't really want to be clogged down with a bunch of like random niche cards that are sometimes good here or there and you inconsistently draw them when you need them. You just want to be able to see your stuff, and then you want to have chainable back row to make sure when your opponent goes for Heavy Storm or Typhoon, you actually plus on them. So yeah, for the real big winner, real big obvious winner is going to be Blackwings. We'll use like a little Blackwing guy to, what is it, Blizzy? We'll use Blizzy maybe. Blackwing Gale, nah, we need Blizzy. Where's he at? Maybe Bora, actually. Yeah, we use Bora. Yeah, Bora will be our icon. So yeah, Bora, that boy. Blackwing's huge winner, clearly, because they won RBT LA. So like literal and figurative winner. Let's get to the game plan pentagon, whatever the fuck. I need to find it. I have it on my computer somewhere. I know I saved it recently. There it is. All right, game plan pentagon. This is the Edison game plan pentagon. I've devised this basic categorization for every deck in Edison format, and these are like the basic game plans in Edison format, basically. So we're gonna do a little bit of a sketch on these bad boys. We'll do a little new layer. There we go. Okay, so the decks that I think improve are gonna be, well, let's do the decks I think are gonna do poorly. Let's do improve first. Let's do improve. Okay, the game plans I think improve are normal summon attack. I think this gets a lot better. Part of the reason this gets a lot better is because basically when your opponent's back row are like slower, like the draw traps are, they are negative tempo, right? They don't get you the draw right away. They get you the draw a turn later. So they are negative tempo. So it benefits if you have a way to rush your opponent because their trap cards are now a little bit slower, or they've elected to include these negative tempo cards in their deck. Now, whether or not they've decided to cut negative tempo cards for negative tempo cards, or they've decided to, cut actual like interaction for these cards, that's dependent on the use case. But generally speaking, the faster decks are going to be able to not only take advantage of using the negative tempo cards because they're already fast to begin with, but they're also going to be taking advantage of playing against those cards as well. Generally speaking, I think the draw spell decks they stay about the same. The synchro combo decks do get a little bit better because I think there are a lot of power cards in synchro combo decks, namely like in zombies there's the Goblin Zombie, right? Like that's a pretty big power card, and seeing that early is pretty good. And then also being able to defend like your back row, like Return from the Different Dimension, make sure it's harder to snipe with Typhoon and Spot Removal is pretty good. And then there's the quick draw decks, which we'll get into a bit more later. I think they're going to fall more into the question mark category. Just depends on how they're built. I think some quick draw decks will benefit and some quick draw decks won't. But just being able to consistently see quick draw and Dandelion in your hand in the same game, it is a huge boon to those decks. As far as lockout decks go, I think they're going to be about the same, maybe like a slight increase. I'll do like a half arrow for them. But I think that they'll be like slight increase because I think that just the draw traps will help you find your proactive floodgates and also defend them and bait back removal all at the same time. So stuff like Level Limit Area B, Gravity Bind become more consistent because even though they're limited to 1, you're going to see them more consistently and you can rely on them a little bit more consistently. And then stuff like Rivalry and Gozen gets a little bit better. That being said, I think lockout decks are just kind of like generally underpowered in Edison format to begin with. But I do think like maybe Necro Valley could benefit a lot from playing the 6 draw traps. Maybe Gravekeepers could benefit a lot. That's going to go in the question mark category. The stuff I think that does worse is going to be Mill Prage. I think this game plan is going to be a lot worse when integrating the 6 draw traps, with some exceptions. So I'm going to be like, with exception. Yeah, whatever. If someone with exceptions, I think there's one exception to the Mill Prage game plan that does get better. But generally speaking, your Ryko decks are going to be getting a lot worse. And then I think the draw spell decks are going to remain mostly the same, maybe get a little bit worse, because the big draw spell decks in the format are Dragon Turbo, and that's pretty much it. It's just Dragon Turbo, kind of Lightsworn to agree, but Lightsworn is also like Mill Prage. But I think they get kind of worse because when you go for Giant Trunade, your opponent chains a bunch of back row and then they get to draw new cards. Or you go for your Heavy Storm and your Heavy Storm doesn't get you card advantage. It's like it doesn't really land right. It probably is going to end up being largely the same, but I think in general I'll merge these 2 layers and we'll mute them for now. But this is like, I think the normal summon attack decks are the big benefactors here. I think these are going to be the decks that get the best as a result of playing these 6 draw traps and playing against these 6 draw traps. I think these get a significant bonus. All right, let's get back into the winners and the losers. So I think Blackwing's big winner. HT19's deck. Another big winner, which is counterintuitive to the diagram I just showed, but I think this is the one exception to Mill Prage. This is a deck I played on camera like 1 or 2 days ago, depending on when this video goes up. This is Christus Horn with 5 of the draw traps in it, and I think the draw traps specifically in Christus Horn are really fucking good. I'm not sure this list is perfect. I did talk about it a little bit in the video, but it's pretty damn close. And I think that the Legacy and the Jar of Greed do a great job of protecting your key back row in Beckoning Light and Call the Haunted. So that's a large part of it. And then on top of that, you just really want to see Solar Recharge and your boss monsters consistently. And I think Legacy and Jar of Greed do a better job of turboing through your deck and finding your power cards than something like Goldsark would in this deck. Because Goldsark is like negative tempo, but it's negative 2 turns. The draw traps are only negative 1 turn. So they are slightly faster than cards that have been previously played. They're not as specific as Goldsark. They don't find the exact card that you need like Goldsark does, but I think they are just strong enough that they are worth playing because it allows you to cut a bunch of the fluff that this deck was playing previously. So I'm going to put Christus Horn in the winners category. I think Christus Horn is the big mill strategy. I think cutting Ryko and cutting Hamster from Christus Horn is another way that you can make up for the lost tempo of playing Jar of Greeds and playing Legacy of Yatagarasu in the deck as well, because those are also negative tempo cards, and as you can see here, I've gone down to 2 Rykos, and I do think that with the advent of these cards being popular in the metagame, Ryko gets significantly worse. All right, moving on. One of the big losers of this, I think, is going to be Vayu Turbo, and this is for a couple of different reasons. But I think the biggest reason is one of the biggest factors of playing these cards, the Legacy and the Jar of Greed, is that you're going to be drawing cards more. And while you are going to be drawing, you're going to be drawing a more consistent density of the mix of cards that you want to see in your deck, basically. Whereas, I feel like Vayu Turbo really does well when it doesn't draw all 3 Sirocco's and all 3 Vayus when they're in the deck for you to send with your Armageddon Knight. And I think it takes advantage of the fact that Dark Grepher and Armageddon Knight are functional tutors. They're not exactly draw power. I think the second you start adding draw power into Vayu Turbo, you encounter some weird issues with consistency. It unironically makes the deck a little bit more consistent, or a little bit less consistent, because your opening hand configuration sometimes just contains too many normal summons. Vayu Turbo, contrary to its deck's name, I think is quite a slow deck. There's a really large amount of normal summons in the deck, and there's a very small density of power cards that you actually want to see. That being said, I think that it could play it as a way to to conceal the return from the different dimension if you leaned harder into that and played less of the oppression game plan. But then I think you're not playing to the strengths of the deck so much, and you're just playing like kind of a weaker like all-in OTK deck than something like Dragons or something like I don't know, Blackwings, for example. Another reason why I think Value Turbo loses is because once you cut the Raikos from the Value Turbo deck, well, not cut Raikos, but like, let's say your Raikos aren't hitting as consistently. Like you flip Raiko and you target back row. Usually if you go T-set and you set your Raiko in your back row and your opponent goes T-set, you're going to go flip Raiko, target their back row, then sack Raiko for Caius, target their monster. That's kind of like the game plan of Raiko Caius going first. When your Raiko flips, targets the back row, and your opponent chains it and gets a draw off of it, and then kind of eats your Raiko for free. It's like they trade the Raiko for whatever their set monster is, and then you put the Caius in play, and then you're kind of at the mercy of like your opponent's comeback, and you've already burned your Raiko and Caius, and you don't even end up cards in that exchange. You end up a mill, which can be cards, but it significantly weakens the impact of Raiko Caius going first. And as we all know, Raiko Caius going second is really slow. So it just weakens that deck's A plan, which I think is part of the reason why we saw HT19 do so well at RBET LA. I think he beat every Value Turbo player he played against. He played against like 5 Value Turbo players and beat them all except one, something like that. So yeah, I think this deck is gonna get significantly worse. And then for other reasons, I think a lot of the decks that benefit from playing the draw traps just kind of beat up on Value Turbo or beat up on like Hamster Raiko Caius decks in general. And to add on to that, I am gonna put Quick Draw, which is another Hamster Raiko Caius deck, in the kind of in the unknown category, because I feel like while Quick Draw does benefit from seeing Quick Draw Dandelion as often as possible, cutting Raiko means you're going to see Dandelion less often. So it's kind of like in this weird, like, yes, it helps, but it also takes away that you were finding Dandelion if you do end up cutting into your Raiko Caiuses. And then if you are continuing to play Raiko Caiuses, you're making your Raikos and your Caiuses are getting worse, because swinging them into back row that is chainable is just like, it's not minus, but it's like you put yourself behind a lot of time just going 1-for-1, or not even 1-for-1 really, just summoning a 200-100 monster. It's like 2 turns to summon a 200-100 monster in mill 3, and your opponent doesn't really lose anything. So there's really no inherent advantage for you to be playing Raiko in a metagame where people have those chainable back rows. So Quick Draw, it's kind of like in the nebulous zone. I think Quick Draw and Dandelion as cards get a lot better, but I don't know if the old skeleton is really what's going to work. I played a list here on the channel that was a dark Quick Draw list, and I think that list has some potential. It wasn't playing Raikos, it was playing Mystic Tomatoes as a way to find Sangan, and it was also playing 6 of the draw traps and Dark Arm Dragon as your kind of big payoff that you can find with the draw traps. I didn't find that deck to be particularly impressive. It was consistent, it did its thing, but I wasn't really super excited by it. I'm not really sure where Quick Draw is going to land with these 6 draw traps. I'm not really sure if it's going to be good or bad as a result. It's hard to tell. One thing is for certain, though, I do think garnets in general, I'm going to use Titanial to sort of signify this, but I think garnets in general are big losers of these trap cards, because you're going to see deeper into your deck. You're going to be much more likely to draw into your garnets in an average game. So I think things like Titanial, Spined Gilman, I wonder if I even have a Spined Gilman image on my computer. Hold on. Let's see. I might not even have an image. What's another? Malicious, maybe? Destiny Hero Malicious? I might have that. There we go. We've got it. We've got Destiny Hero Malicious. Yeah, I think these cards get worse. I think they just get worse because you're going to brick on them way more. So decks like Diva Hero, decks playing Titanial, with maybe the exception of Amaryllis, which we'll get to in a second. Actually, let's just talk about Amaryllis right now. So Amaryllis, I'm not really sure if it's going to be a winner or a loser of this. I'm not really certain. I think we can maybe speculate on it. I have played Amaryllis in the past. Where is that shit? Here it is. With triple Upstart Goblin, as well as Quick Draw Dandy. And I've trimmed on a lot of the negative tempo, like Millers, like multiple Raiko, multiple Lila. And I'm not necessarily certain if this style of deck is better or worse than the previous styles of Amaryllis, and I'm not necessarily certain if there's a way to fit Legacy of Yatagarasu into this type of deck, but I could see this type of deck being really good against Legacy style decks because, like I said, those negative tempo trap cards, you start a little bit more behind than usual, and then all of a sudden you're staring down Titanial Amaryllis and you're at like 4,000 life points and you're just like, what happened? And you draw into another Jar of Greed and you're like, oh, this is really bad. So I could see like maybe some of the more hyper aggressive Amaryllis decks taking advantage of it. But that being said, if you're like leaning too much into like the discard traps and you go Phoenix Wing and your opponent just chains the Legacy, or you go like Raikou Flip Target and they chain Legacy, or even Lila Pop chain Legacy is pretty bad. So I think it depends on how the Amaryllis decks are constructed moving into the future, but it's kind of an unknown for me as of right now. One of the decks I think that does get a lot better is Frog Hero. I think Frog Hero gets a lot better. I had a pretty low opinion of Frog Hero moving into RBET LA. I know it's had like a little bit of sprinkled success here and there. Let's see, I'm gonna close this guy. Here's the Frog Hero list from RBET LA. This is the second place list played by David from RBET LA, and it plays the 5 draw traps. And I want to take a moment to like look at this list before I explain why I didn't think Frog Hero was very good. So this list is really nice, right? It just has everything you want to see. And then you're just going to see it way more consistently because you're functionally playing a 35 card deck, right? Sengen gets you to all of your engines. Subsatote gets you to your frogs. He's not overloaded on cards that break in multiples like Swap Frog, or potentially even Ryza, or potentially even like too many Dupe Frogs. I know some people play 3 Dupe Frogs, usually not in Frog Hero, but he has exactly the number of cards that he wants to see in an opening hand. And then he fills out the empty deck space with just these draw traps. And the nice thing about it in this deck as well is it takes away a lot of the guessing game. Like sometimes your opponent will like set a Heavy Storm and you're playing Frog Hero and you're like, well, they have a back row. Now I have to consider a bunch of back row. But now if you just go set Legacy to set Jar of Greed, your opponent is the one who has to consider the back row. And on top of that, they're going to play the Heavy Storm. You're going to get that +1. And then you're just going to be, you're not going to have to play that guessing game. So it removes a 50-50 for you while delivering a 50-50 for the opponent, which is really, really nice. On top of that, it means you get to cut a lot of the superfluous parts of this deck, and you get to see, my biggest complaint about Frog Hero is you would normally see like one part of your engine, and you'd see the payoff of Miracle and not see a hero, or you'd see the payoff of the Monarchs and not see the Frogs, or you would see Frogs and Heroes and not see Miracles or Monarchs and see neither of your payoffs. So I think because of the 5 draw traps and because of having that very slimmed deck count functionally, you see your payoffs and your engine much more consistently than before, and I think it improves the consistency of the deck to like an actual playable degree. A lot of people rate Frog Hero highly. A lot of the other competitive players rate it highly, and prior to this 5 draw trap build, I would say it was like maybe like a B tier deck, just because of consistency issues. Historically in RBET, despite it being like the 3rd or like even 2nd most played deck in some cases, it has underperformed. It has never won an RBET, and it had never gotten this close except for one other time. Usually it rarely puts multiple copies into top 8. Maybe there's one person who makes it into top 8, but it's usually 0, despite being a very heavily represented deck. But this list making it all the way to 2nd at I think one of the most competitive tournaments of the year, because of the Legacy and the Jars, I think is really nice. And then on top of that, I think this deck does pretty well into the Legacy and the Jars, because you can kind of just force them out with Unifrog, and then you can also make them look silly with like just summon Vanity's Fiend, and then your opponent's like, ah shit, I wish I had a real trap card set. So I think it plays okay into the draw traps, but I think it really just benefits from having them in the deck list. So I'm going to put it as a huge winner here. I think playing them in the Frog Hero list is pretty smart. Pretty smart. All right, moving on. Some of the other winners. Let me see here. What have I got? I wrote a list here so I wouldn't forget. Oh, hand traps. I guess we'll use Gores to signify that. Gores is a pretty big winner. I think. Oh my god, huge Gores photo. Yeah, the Gores is a pretty big winner, but also the other hand traps in general. One of the nice things about the draw traps is like when your opponent like Space Typhoons or Heavy Storms you can chain them, and then if you draw into a hand trap like a DD Crow, Battle Fader, Herald of Orange Light, Tragodia, Gores, Honest, Kalut, etc., those cards are still defensive options even after your opponents use their sweeper and The draw traps can dig you further into them, so you see them more consistently. So I think hand traps are a big winner. I'm going to use the text here to write little hand traps. I don't know if people can see that or not, but whatever. It's there, right? Hand traps. I think hand traps are a huge winner. They're a huge winner. Basically, any deck that can play hand traps, partially why I was leaning so heavily into the Christus deck, is because look at this. You have 6 hand traps. Not only that, but you also have grave traps in Necrogardener. So the 6 hand traps and like your floodgate monsters make the draw spells even better. Or not draw spells, draw trap cards even better. So I think huge winners. And then to some degree, I would put like Chaos Fairies in this as well. I think Chaos Fairies is gonna see a huge improvement in consistency. They play a large number of hand traps. I'm gonna go ahead and write Chaos Fairies as well. Chaos Fairy. I think that this is a deck that super benefits. I haven't really built a Chaos Fairy list with the 6 draw traps yet, but I'm sure people have worked on it, and I think it's definitely one of the better decks to take advantage of them. Now, normally Chaos Fairies is kind of pigeonholed into needing to use Decree, but I think that you could workshop a list that doesn't need to, and has a lot of success with that as well. And I think by extension the regular fairy deck as well, even though we've already seen that have success with Legacy. RBET Rulers won when Pro Storm won with a regular fairy deck, so with like a fairy DD Warrior Lady deck. Alright, what else is on my list? Once again, just draw traps, hand traps, great combination. Big loser of all of this is gonna be Breaker. I think Breaker gets a shitload worse. I don't know how to say it. It sucks because I loved using Breaker, but summoning him and just popping a draw trap feels pretty terrible. And by extension, I also think Lila. I don't even know if I have a Lila image saved. I don't. But Breaker and Lila, I'll just put a little plus Lila there next to it. Breaker plus Lila. I think these cards get a lot worse. Just hitting a chainable draw trap just feels really fucking bad. And it eats your whole turn. It eats your normal summon. Means you put a weak monster into play. Your opponent digs into a way to punish you for like summoning weak monster, like whether it's a brain control or like just a Shura or a fire dog or whatever it is they're playing. It's tough. It's tough. What can I say? I guess I should use the text thing here to also say like garnets plus garnets. I think garnets just get worse in general. Huge downswing for them. All right, moving on. What else did I say is a winner? Oh, Aggro Dragons, which I believe I have a Spear Dragon here somewhere. I think this deck gets a shitload better with the draw traps. Not only with them, but against them as well, because it's such an aggressive deck. If your opponent has like a few kind of like slower back row and they're trying to bluff you out and you just say better have it, I'll say Aggro Dragons does really well. I think it does really well. It's one of those, like I said, game plan pyramid. Where's that shit? Where is that shit? I put it here somewhere. Where did I put it? This is one of those normal summon attack decks. So I think as a result, being a normal summon attack deck, it's going to do a lot better. Just because people are going to have slower back row, and you're going to be able to take advantage of seeing Future Fusion more often, which is your power card. So not only that, but we've seen, like I said, Jackson's list in the previous videos with Burial and Return, just being able to more consistently rely on those power cards that were otherwise like really strong but super inconsistent before. Just guaranteeing you see the cards that set that up more often is just really nice. So yeah, huge win there for those decks. I think aggro decks in general, I'll say Glads. Glads I don't know. I think Gladiator, Beast. I've seen a list of this before play Legacy of Yatagarasu and have success. There was someone who played Tigerless Glads with Legacy of Yatagarasu and had success in a Deck Devastators tournament. That being said, it was a while ago. It was before Edison was more developed, and I'm not really sold on it. I think if I was going to play Legacy of Yatagarasu in a Glads deck, I would want it to be more combo focused. I would want it to be more Prisma, more Cat, more Test Tiger focused, because when they pop your thing and then you chain it and you draw into a Test Tiger, it just feels really fucking good, because then you have a comeback play to answer their board as well. So that's really nice. And then I also think it works well with kind of like Gores, Hedge Guard, even some of the other hand traps you could utilize in Gladiator Beast. But I think Gladiator Beast is like a pretty weak deck to begin with. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's going to be a winner in this type of metagame. And then on top of that, I think when your opponent has their own draw traps, Gladiator Beast kind of plays poorly into that. Like, you'll go Geyserist, pop their back row, and they just like chain the draw traps. It's a little ugly. Or if you go Trapstone, Cold Wave, they chain the draw traps, they find their like Herald, their hand trap, something like that. Or even their comeback play like Brain Control or something like that. It can be pretty hard for Glads to play into the draw traps. So I'm not super sold on it, and I don't think it does great into the other normal summon attack decks in the format. I actually think dragons, aggro dragons, black wings, and to some degree even like stun decks, which I think can take a huge advantage. I guess I should put stun decks. I'll put Kaiku the Ghost Destroyer because he's pretty much the big anti-meta guy. Big anti-meta guy of the season of the game right now. I'll put stun. All right, why is it not red for no reason? Why is it the why did it? Oh my gosh. Scuffed video. I think stun gets a huge buff here because I think having fake back row and making your opponent 50-50 into like deep prisons and bottomlesses while you're backing up like a huge like floodgate monster is just really ugly. I was playing a game recently where I was just playing like an anti-meta deck, and I had a Kaiku in play with 2 legacies and a Mirror Force set, and I was just like, I don't really care what my opponent has here, I'm just winning. And then on top of that, your power plays, your comeback plays like Chaos Sorcerer and Stun or Dark Armed if you play it, you can find them more consistently with the Legacy of Yatagarasu, etc. So because I think that those decks are like big winners here, and they beat up on Glads, Blackwings as well, I don't know. Glads is going to go in the, I don't know if they really benefit from Legacy and Jar tier. They could. And we, like I've said, we've seen one list have success with Legacy in it before. One Glad list have success before, so I wouldn't be totally unsurprised to see it again. Generally speaking, I think Diva Hero, as we know it, gets a little bit worse. But that's, I've got the Malicious here. I think there's a couple more I wanted to see. Oh yeah, X-Sabers. I think Sabers is like a secret winner here. Not because you actually want to play the draw traps yourself. You definitely don't. Because, well, I'll explain it. Where is the shit? Where's it at? Oh, that's a Gladiator Beast deck. That's a cool deck. Anyway, this is Totogon's first place Saber deck. I'm sure you guys have watched the video. You don't play the draw traps in this deck because every draw trap, every card you draw past the first card, you run the risk of drawing a second Airbellum, which is really bad. So, you don't play draw traps, you don't play Upstart. But this deck fucking rolls people when they play the draw traps. Not only does Airbellum and Rescue Cat like really punish those, Gotems as well. As long as you just resolve your combo, you're emptying your opponent's hand. So the draw traps are basically like non-activatable back row or non-interactive back row that you can play through fairly easily and punish your opponent for having by like ripping their hand. On top of that, I think this deck does really well against normal summon attack decks because you set an Emmer's Blade, and it's like the best thing that can happen for you is they attack your Emmer's Blade or your Giant Rat, and then you get to search your cat or your whatever, and then you get to set up your OTK combo. So as an OTK deck, as a combo deck, I think it plays really well into the metagame, and I think in my last tier list, I may have underrated X-Sabers. After playing with it a lot more, I've found, especially this build, this very advanced build from Totogon, subscribe to Totogon, of course, I think this deck is pretty solid. I think it might even be bumped up to like tier 2, just because of the shifts in the metagame to play the 6 draw traps to adapt to Hamster Raikou Caius dominance. So X-Sabers, I think, is a huge winner. I think it's like one of the biggest winners. I'm gonna circle it. I'm actually gonna circle it with green because I wanna signify how big of a winner it is. Where's my drawing layer? I have a drawing layer, don't I? Whatever. We'll just make a new one. Cool. There it is. X-Sabers, big winner. I'm gonna put a money sign, $sign, cash money. Ayo. Yeah, that's what's up. Okay, cash money. Hell yeah. Okay. X-Sabers, huge winner. Green Arrow. I think this deck fucking rules when everyone's playing Legacy and Jar of Greed. All right. Last few notes that I have here are deck devastation virus. I don't know. This is an interesting card. Does it get better or does it get worse with everyone playing the draw traps? Let's take a look at what gets better. Hand traps get better, so deck dev gets better because it interacts with hand traps. But your opponent can just hold their draw trap till after deck dev has taken its effect. So it's a way to kind of save your draws for later. But if you manage to piece together deck dev plus a sweeper, they're forced to use the draw traps into deck dev. I don't know. Remains to be seen if this gets worse or better. I don't know. That's one that I'm like, I don't know. Maybe it's just the same. Maybe it's still exactly where it was at before. Maybe it didn't move at all. But I think whenever a lot of people are playing cards that draw other cards, you have to consider, like, how does this affect deck dev? Can they afford to hold those cards until after I've resolved deck dev? What's going on there? What's the situation? Trap Stun is another card that I think I don't know how good this card is going to get, or if it's going to see more play. That being said, I think Trap Stun is, I think it's good in general in the metagame. It's just a way to 1-for-1 trade with any back row that isn't solemn. So I think Trap Stun is just a card that's undervalued in general. But are we going to see more play when we have decks like Frogs, wherever the fuck that shit is, playing 5 more traps than they used to? Is Trap Stun in the main much more safe? Who knows? And the fact that draw traps can be chained to Trap Stun also makes them not as susceptible to Trap Stun, so I'm not really sure. That's one that it's like kind of questionable. This is a list I played recently with 6 Sams. I think this deck gets significantly boosted. That's definitely a huge winner. Maybe I'll put a 6 Samurai, Grandmaster, something like that. Yeah, I think this deck gets a lot better because of the 6 draw traps, because you're just going to more consistently see your Gateway, more consistently see your Grandmaster, more consistently see your other stuff. I think it's definitely a huge winner here. It goes from being a deck that I think is not playable to a deck that I think is very playable. This style of list where you don't have too many normal summons, you don't have too many bricks, all of your game plan is just lock people out and then spam like the spot removal guys and then reuse them with the Gateway. That's pretty hype. That's pretty nuts. I'm not going to lie. The deck gets a lot better. What deck is this? Sabers, Glads. Yeah, we talked about Glads. We talked about Amaryllis. What deck is this? Ancient Gears. So yeah, Machina's kind of another, like, I don't know. In general, I would say, like, Hamster Raiko Caius Machina gets worse. I would say it gets worse. In general, I'm going to put Raiko in the gets worse category. So, like, I think Raiko gets worse, but Machina could get better in, like, the more OTK variants, like this one. This is a shitty list. This is a list from, like, Deck Devastators, like, 1 or something like that I had in my builder from forever ago. But maybe something like this. Like, you cut the Ancient Gear Knights, and you add 3 Legacy of Yatagarasu. How does that look? Well, significantly more consistent. You're going to see limiter removal. You're going to see Future Fusion Overload. You're going to see your gear frames more consistently. So I think there's some potential there for sure for it to be pushed even further in with regards to its consistency. One thing that's just really interesting overall, after reflecting on this huge change, I think, in the way we are building Edison decks with the draw traps, is just how much we overlooked it. It's crazy because Legacy of Yatagarasu won RBE2 Rulers 1, which is like the premier tournament of the year, right? It won the World Championships. And then after that, like, everyone was like, oh, it won World Championships, but people, like, started disrespecting the deck it was used in. People started disrespecting the card in general. And they were just like, whatever, it was a fluke, right? And now we're seeing it like, oh, no, it's actually so good that you want to play 6 copies of it, not just 3. So, I don't know. It's really interesting. I definitely like Edison format more, I think, with people playing it. I think it makes the format better. It takes away one of the worst, in my opinion, paradigms of the format, which was going first and setting Raikou in the Raikou mirror always felt terrible, or just like going second versus like Hamster Caius always felt terrible. But now when you have Legacy and Jar of Greed, that paradigm becomes so much less bad. You have chainable back row to bait their spot removal. You have this whole new mini game that they have to play, and it makes going second better, which is always a treat in Yu-Gi-Oh. I think the more balanced going second is, the better a format is in general. It gives a lot of back and forth, and it gives a lot more play to a format that was leaning too much in a way that I think was favorable for like the flip effects. So I think as a very natural answer to it, I'm happy, and I'm excited to see where things go from here. A lot of cool ways this format could shape up beyond the 6 draw traps, and I'm sure there's other like more niche ways to take advantage of this, like maybe just maining Spirit Reaper in your deck, or maybe like teching Protector of the Sanctuary to like randomly lock your Frog opponent's Jar of Greed in their back row. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of like weird like interactions that could come up that we haven't even yet seen. We haven't even seen the full picture yet. So I'm excited to see where things go. But this is my early impressions on this big change, and let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and let me know if you guys like this type of video. I'll have to try and do more of them in the future. Peace.